So you don't have to stay in a abusive relationship, whether that's sexual, whether that's somebody forcing you to take illegal drugs, or alcohol abuse, or physical abuse. How do you think God feels about that?
Hey, how are you? A lot of people, hey, sir. A lot of people want to know if you murdered your wife.
As many of you may know, a massive new lawsuit has been filed against John Paul Miller and his father, Wayne. In the lawsuit, it alleges that Pastor John Paul Miller allegedly sexually assaulted a 15-year-old girl, and his father did everything he could to protect his son. This extremely detailed lawsuit goes on top of the court documents filed some time ago from his ex-wife, Allison Williams, who accuses her former husband of admitting to multiple inappropriate relationships with children. And one thing I want to remind you of is when those court documents were filed, John Paul Miller allegedly sent this text message admitting that he dated children when he was 19 years old. We'll come back to that part of the story in just a second, because I want to shift our focus back to the person who started this all, Mica.
I've kind of had to keep my circle really small for the past couple weeks, just because I'm going through a lot and it's hard, and it's my cross to bear. It's the thing that God has put in my life to deal with, and I don't want to bring a lot of people into it. I'm so thankful to God for a strong family and the friends that God has put in my life to be there for me at this time.
Remember, in the weeks and months prior to her death, her pastor husband was hell-bent in slandering her name while trying to convince the world that she was indeed mentally sick and crazy.
And 6 weeks ago, she goes in the hospital, gets out, and just leaves. Just completely leaves me, leaves everything, drains the bank account, and goes.
On a weekly basis, John Paul Miller stood up in front of his congregation and gave updates about his estranged wife. On one occasion, he said that she brought back demons from Africa. And of course, we already know about the text messages that John Paul Miller sent to members of his church, where he accuses Mica of having sex with a member of his staff on the beach, which of course is a lie. JP's attempt to make his wife look crazy wasn't working, and members of his church began to catch on. They started to realize that Mica was simply a victim of abuse.
So I want to remind you, like a bunch of people have been reminding me lately, that I'm God's bride first.
And Mica went on the offense. She began talking and meeting with members of Solid Rock one-on-one, telling them exactly what she had been through. And word began to spread. JP was losing his church, and he began to panic. He started to go crazy himself, even kicking out members of his church who supported Mica on Sunday mornings in front of hundreds of people.
He's on an antipsychotic medicine. He didn't pick up his latest prescription, which he should have on January 3rd. And I believe at this point, based on the people that he's come in contact with, some of them reported to me that based on how he was talking, they feared he had killed and buried me somewhere.
And just days before her death, Mica allegedly reported John Paul Miller to the IRS. Mica filed for divorce, and Mica wanted a restraining order. The one person that could bring John Paul Miller down, he had lost control of. The question has always been, how much did Mica know? Well, now we have an idea. In a Facebook message we believe sent to an elder from Mica herself, she exposes who John Paul really is. And because this happened after Mica got away from John Paul and had her own Facebook page, we believe that elder took a screenshot of that conversation and sent it to John Paul Miller. John Paul sent that message to multiple members of his church, trying to convince them that Mica was crazy. Look at the things she is saying about me. Now back to Jane Doe's lawsuits and the court papers that Allie filed. It appears Mica knew everything. Weeks after this message was sent, Mica Francis was dead. No pastor can survive being labeled as a child rapist. Affairs are one thing. Prostitutes are one thing. Saying awful things are one thing. Owning a bar is one thing. But no pastor can survive being labeled a child rapist. Putting money in manila envelopes is one thing. Washing it clean is one thing. But no pastor can survive being labeled a child rapist.
What do you think your heavenly spouse does when you're the bride of Christ and he sees his bride going through abuse and hurt? What do you think he thinks about that? So, encouragement in all this is you are the bride of Christ first before anybody else's. And he's got you. And he sees you. And he loves you.
And Mica told a lot of people. And Mica was free from you. And Mica had had enough. And Mica was going to do everything she could to take you down, to expose the truth, to protect her friends. Mica was over it. No pastor can survive that label. And you knew it. So you had her killed, didn't you? Three women. Allie, Mica, and Jane Doe 1. The FBI continues to investigate the death of Mica Francis, and John Paul Miller will be held responsible for her death, and he will go to jail.